librarians. Welcome to episode 341 of School Librarians United. I'm your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 19th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is @LMS_United. On Threads and Instagram, you can find me at School Librarians United and on Bluesky at SLU Podcast or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now for today's episode, Community Collection Development, and my conversation with Alexa Dumas. Friends, I'm so excited. Alexa Dumas, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Amy, for having me on.
So we are in for a treat, friends, for many different reasons we'll get into very shortly. But Alexa, would you let listeners know, tell us about yourself, your library, the grades you serve, and some of the programs that you offer?
So sure. So again, I'm Alexa Dumas. I'm the middle school library media specialist in the Plattsburgh City School District. I serve a super diverse population of over 400 students in grades 6 through 8, and we're located 30 minutes from the Canadian border. We're right below Quebec. And we're also right on Lake Champlain, so you can see Vermont, right? Sometimes from school, but like down a couple blocks, you can see Vermont from the lake. So I run a flexible schedule program, so kids come in during their free time. Every period's 40 minutes, so they get 40 minutes of free library time. Their choice, they get to do what they want. Come in during study hall. I have games, they read, they do their homework. I have different maker space stations throughout the library, so it's very student-centered. They get to do what they want. I do push-in lessons sometimes, but in September I did 2 full weeks of library orientation with all of my students, so I didn't actually open until September 22nd.
Wow. It sounds like you have, every day is different.
Every day is different. I also run a school-wide reading challenge. My students get to read, if they choose to. It's called the Olympian Reading Challenge. They have their 3 years in middle school to read 30 books that I choose. They're all award winners, all books that, everything from graphic memoirs to lengthy YA novels, because I have a very wide array of readers. And it's just to get kids away from Diary of a Wimpy Kid and Dog Man. That was the whole intention. But they have the podium levels to reach. So to earn bronze, they have to read 5 of the books, and then they have to take comprehension, like really easy 10-question comprehension quizzes with each book that they read. And that's how they get to check it off their list. Once they read 5, they earn bronze. They read 10 more to get to 15, they earn silver. And then once they've read all 30, they earn gold. And then there's different prizes for each level. But I started this last November. I've had 2 finishers so far, and then I have over 30 participants that are still working their way through it.
Well, and I have to imagine you've got some very supportive teachers and families watching you create an opportunity for students to excel in an area which sometimes you might not get a lot of takers, but the kids for whom this is important to them, this may be their thing. And it may be very special to them.
Oh, yeah. Like I have kids who come see me every single day to come take a quiz because they finished a book in a day. And it's honestly, it's sometimes, I wouldn't say annoying, but they come to the desk when I'm the busiest and they're like, Miss Dumas, I really need this quiz. And I'm like, can you wait 5 minutes, please? But that's like the function of the library. You're doing so many things at different times, but the fact that they're excited about it is what gets me through the day.
Well, and you give them permission to be excited. I think that that's really important also to point out because, for many kids, it would be very easy for them to become very self-conscious about this. This is something they're excited about, and you're one of their safe people because they know you, and absolutely you would be incredibly excited for them for this achievement. And it sounds like they want to be excited and share that with you.
I think the big kicker is there's a gas station chain in upstate New York that it has ice cream all year round. So they have their own hard ice cream. So I get them ice cream gift cards once they read their first 5 books, and that really sells the kids. And I did that on purpose. And then when they finish, they get to pick a book that I buy them. Usually it's a thrifted book, but they get to pick out whatever they want. And that's their reward.
And you know what? For kids, this is that, you're speaking their language. You absolutely are motivating them. And it sounds like they would be reading these books, whether or not you gave them anything, but it's for this validation. You've made it cool. You've made it cool.
I try. So some of my other programs that I have too, I just started lunch book clubs this year. So every Friday during the 3 lunch periods, so 6th, 7th, and 8th, lunch periods, we do quarterly books. So each quarter they read a different book. My biggest group, I have 15 7th graders, which is insane to me. My other groups are a lot smaller, but that turnout was just unbelievable. It's dwindled down a little bit. Some of the kids decided it wasn't really for them, and that's totally fine, but I'm still at like 12 kids.
Well, and forgive me, but that means that is fewer kids in the lunchroom, fewer kids in the cafeteria, all of a sudden on Friday when kids are so wound up for the weekend, and you've just freed up that supervision chore, which has been, for your administrators. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, why does it feel like, it's book club day? That's right. So forgive me, are they all reading the same book, or are they all coming to and talking about the books that they like?
I actually read to them. They just eat. They eat for 40 minutes and I read to them. The only group that I have read outside is my 8th graders because they're great kids and they read so fast. So with 8th graders, we're doing a dystopian year. So we're starting with the Hunger Games and they're really into it. So they want to read by themselves anyway. So we read a chapter together, they read a chapter, and then we come back together, talk about it, and hang out.
Yeah, Neil Schusterman. All right.
We're reading Unwind in the 3rd quarter, and I get to meet him at our New York State conference at the end of April. So I did it on purpose.
Fantastic. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
But I also love that you have students who are listening to you read during their lunch. And I'm going to tell you what, as an elementary librarian, that is a throwback to my 5th grade teachers who absolutely not only expected the students to read, but also modeled that. And really what you're doing is sending the message to them that this is important. And absolutely. And by you saying, you know what, you guys eat, I'm going to read. There is something so comforting about that experience. And they're probably just drinking it in. And they're becoming readers, whether you realize it or not, because what they are now doing is wanting more than anything to be able to do that reading on their own. And you're just giving them that, that interest. You're like feeding that interest. I love that. Oh, what a great idea.
Yeah, it's not even that I care that they're listening. I just like that they're here and they're hanging out with me. That's really all I care about. So it's forming connections with my students. And then I do self-directed programming. I started new this year. I'm doing monthly scavenger hunts in the library. So all the questions are based off of what's on the shelf, what's going on, and then they get a lollipop if they complete it. So that's happening. I have book bingo. And then a program I ran last year that I'm going to do again this year in March when I do my 2nd big book purchase. I did a new book bash where these students, I did it during 9th period when the most study halls are. Kids had to sign up beforehand and then they got first exclusive VIP access to all the new books. They got snacks and they got drinks, and I swear the 25 kids that signed up left with 1 or 2 books. All of them did.
But again, celebrating books. Like you've made this cool. And forgive me, the fact that you happen to be on the young end of the spectrum here,
Yeah.
you get somebody like me who all of a sudden I don't carry that kind of cool when I do anything in my space. But I have to imagine that the kids have figured out that you are not nearly as old as most of their teachers.
Yeah.
So we might as well. So friends, it is possible you could tell maybe the difference in Alexa makes me feel incredibly ancient. That's not a bad thing. But friends, Alexa is actually younger than my own children. I am more than twice your age. But that's okay, because I think generationally it is awfully important. Let's be honest. You came to me with your episode idea. Why now? What happened that you said, I'm sending this email to Amy?
So there's a lot of different things. I'm a dedicated listener to the podcast. I actually just started listening to it in July, but I listen to it every day. And I've been racking my brain about something to submit because you have an open invitation. So I've been thinking about things I could submit. And I thought about, this is my second full year in my library. And I've done so many different projects to revamp it from when I first walked in the doors. And when I finished library school in May, I had to do projects to fulfill credits. And I just decided to submit that project to the podcast because I thought it was something important to share. And it wasn't something I was hearing about in other episodes. And I also think that having a young early career librarian perspective is something I wouldn't say that's needed in the podcast, but I didn't really hear anyone that was around my age. If someone was an early career librarian that you interviewed, it was their second career. I went into university wanting to be a school librarian. So I've known since I was 17 years old that this was going to be the career for me. And also I'm trying to broaden my horizons in the library world. In November, I will be serving on the NYLA Sizzle board. So that's our section of school librarians in New York State. And I'll be the Region 5 representative. So I represent North Country librarians from Lake Champlain to Lake Ontario. And I'll be the youngest person on the board. But I'm so excited to, have a fresh new perspective in seats that I hold. And I think it's just important to have that younger voice because we are the new generation of librarians that not many people really know about, I guess, because not many people go into library school I went into library school, I just turned 22. So a brand new experience for me. And I just want to share that with other people, I guess.
And I'm here for it. And I'll tell you what, Alexa is 100% correct. I extend an invitation to you all every single episode. What I'd love to do more than anything is shine a light on the things that we do. And that also means coming from the perspective of where we are. Alexa, I was teaching at 22, but I was a classroom teacher. In fact, my first library that I landed, I was 37. I went to library school. The first class I took, I was 31 years old. The Twin Towers fell. 1 week in my first library science class in 2001, and I'd started my first semester of library school. I also got pregnant with twins. So all of a sudden, that library career was going to be I put that on hold for about 6 years until my twins were ready for kindergarten, at which point I was 37 and I was going to go be a librarian for the first time. So it wasn't for a lack of trying. It just situationally and circumstantially, that's what happened with me. But I love that you're here, and I love that you're already recognizing that what you bring to a conversation is going to be unique because you represent generationally a younger group of learners and educators. And that voice is important. So I'm really glad you're here. I do want to back up. You talked about some amazing things in your introduction. Listeners are going to want to see an example. If you have anything that you mentioned in your introduction that you could put into the show notes as a hey, this is what we talked about, and this is an example of something I've done with my students, that would be fantastic, because anytime you share, and then I did this and it was an amazing program. Please don't hesitate to put that in our show notes because listeners right now are saying, oh, that sounds like an amazing idea. I should do that too. All right. And then friends, the other thing that Alexa has reminded me is that her programs that she's going to share do include a lot of harnessing the power of recruiting free labor. And I give you a lot of credit because for me, the hardest thing for me is letting go of this idea that the librarian is the one to transform the collection. Because your episode today, we're going to focus on how you led that initiative, but you also shared the labor with individuals who felt passionately and wanted to help you accomplish a goal in a timely fashion. And time is so precious. So I'm very excited to learn about what you're going to share with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. You did just graduate from library school, is that correct?
Yes, I did. I graduated from the University at Buffalo in May of this year, and then I became certified as a New York State librarian in the first week of June. So
amazing. It's been a heck of a summer.
Yeah. And I also, I actually was a public librarian before I was a school librarian. I worked in the public library world for a year and a half, got my job, but I stayed in public librarianship. And there's a cool program in New York State where you send the New York State Library your transcript and $5, and then you become certified as a public librarian. So I'm both certified in public and school.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, there are a lot of good things going on in New York. That's for sure. I love that. Well, and you know what? Given this market, given this economy, I think they're smart because they recognize there are people who have skills and talent and the interest, and they don't want to lose them to another state.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of other states do have reciprocity agreements. So as long as you're certified in New York, at least in New England, you can go anywhere you want. So if something were to happen and I had to move out of state, I would be taken. They would take my certification and we would run with it.
I'm very excited because you mentioned that you have listened to many episodes that we've had. And I'm a little curious because you sent me this email and you'd mentioned that you had a lengthy commute and you listened to the podcast. And I always find it incredibly validating to learn when the podcast has connected with people who need it. And when I wanted to create a podcast and I was thinking about it in the planning stages, I knew I wanted to make sure that we created content that would land with individuals who could then use that information and really support the programming that they're doing in their own or getting the job that would then get them into a position where they could do this. Can I ask you, just out of curiosity, when you were listening to the podcast early on, did you have any way by which you prioritized which episodes you were going to listen to?
So at first, I just picked the most recent episode, but then I did get picky with it. So I really look for episodes that talk about my grade range. So I look for middle school. I look for anything to do with middle grade or anything like that, anything about reading or reading promotion. And that's mostly because this summer I wasn't really having a lot of ideas that were grasping me for things to do. So I just needed to hear someone talk about librarianship. And I'm going to be honest, I don't have friends that are really in libraries. So I don't hear about libraries all the time. So this is my sounding board. So I was looking for that. I love collection development. I actually learned that collection development librarians exist too late in grad school, actually. So I can't go back to school to do it unless in the future, but collection development or metadata librarians, their job is so cool. But this year I'm looking to enhance my manga collection. So I really looked into those episodes a lot. And it's mostly because I'm not a manga reader, but I'm a graphic novel reader. So I'm developing my graphic novel collection, but I know how to do that. My manga collection, not so much. So I listened to those episodes and I have ironically already bought the books that the people talking about it have come on the podcast about. So now I can put a voice to, the text on the page and everything now makes a lot more sense. And then I look for people who I know of, some people that I've seen on social media that I find their names and I listen to them, or they're New York State librarians who are kind of bigwigs in our organization, and I see them presenting all the time and I know their name, so I want to hear what they have to say. So that's how I kind of prioritize it. And then sometimes I'm looking for something specific. So I listen to genrefication or graphic novel ones when I have an idea for something, but I'm not entirely sure how to go about it. So I listen to see what other people are doing.
So many things. You're right. Your state has just powerhouse librarians. Absolutely. And when you mentioned manga, you have Jillian Rudas and Ashley Hawkins. So friends, as some of you are aware, there's a playlist that's linked in every show note. And so some of the things that Alexa mentioned, we've got a middle grade playlist, which is great if you find yourself teaching middle grade, because the people who do those middle grade episodes love middle grade. It's like their absolute favorite. They love it. And they'll have you loving middle grade, even if you've never taught it before. You mentioned reading culture. We have a reading culture playlist. We have a collection development playlist, because I remember collection development for me was like when I realized in library school that I was absolutely supposed to be where I was, because this is like hitting home, even though I had never worked in a library. You had, but I had not. And so, yes. And again, we have the manga playlist. So definitely, friends, I love this because it really does remind me that the work that we do each week to make these episodes available to our listeners is important. Thank you. Like Alexa, if you're sitting on an episode idea, by all means, please know the stage is yours and you're more than welcome to reach out. I will say something that really helped is that when Alexa reached out to me, she also included the things she would want to put in the show notes. That's a gift. So when you reach out to me and say, I want to do an episode, that's fantastic. Even better if you provide for me the content, I can now start to shape those questions that we're going to discuss. So that's absolutely amazing. I love that. So now to the task at hand, sharing your community collection development program with our listeners. Opening up our libraries to the community is an obvious thing that we do every day, but opening up our process as librarians to how our library takes shape, that can, for some people, that's a bridge too far. Would you begin to explain your goals for your collection? And at what point did you realize that what you needed was really all hands on deck to be able to make this vision a reality?
Sure. So all of my goals kind of stem before I even stepped into my library. So the library I'm in now is the first library job I applied for, and I got it. So in the interview, they mentioned that, because I asked, I was like, what library am I walking into? Because the public library that I worked at, that I still work at now, we actually reopened when I first started working there. So I had already done a huge weed in a collection. I've already enhanced a collection. I've already done all the things to turn a collection from nothing into something. So I've had that experience before, because the building had to close because it was built in 1904, and the floor was bad and the roof was bad and it needed supports. So it was closed for 2.5 years. And then my director, who's actually my neighbor, asked me to come and work for him. It was before I even started library school, so I really didn't know what I was doing, but I figured it out and I transformed their children's collection. So I walked into the school library interview already having transformed a library. So I told them I can do the job. And then I walk in, they actually let me, I was supposed to start in September of 2024. And they let me come in early in May. So May 2024, I opened the door and they were right. The books were stacked on the table like 5 books high. No one can sit anywhere. There was no room on the shelf. Books were collecting so much dust. Dust can actually get sticky after a while, and it's so gross. And I just walked in and I was like, oh no, maybe I shouldn't have said yes. But I, rolled up my sleeves and I got right to work with the month and a half left of school, because in New York State, we end the very last week of June. And I worked right up until the end of June. And I ran some tests, I pulled some books, and then I ended up withdrawing over 5,000 fiction books. And they were included in that was like reference books. I found a book that was best authors of 1923 or 1931 or something like that. And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. And it was just fiction, just reference. And I withdrew what I could, but that wasn't even the most of it. So before I think the last 2 weeks of school, I actually put on the announcements every day that kids could come and just take what they want, because I didn't want to have to deal with it, because I would just have to, get rid of it. It ended up taking me the rest of the summer to withdraw all 5,000 books. I had people come and help me just take books to the dumpster because they were so bad. They they were falling apart. They were old. Like, we learned about musty, the weeding tool in library school, and that was it. Everything was musty. But while I did that process, I actually genrefied the library, which helped me tremendously. So a lot of librarians, I don't know if they necessarily do that when they inherit a library, but I thought it was the easiest thing to do, because I knew for my sake, I wanted a genrefied library for my students. So I just did it as I went.
The timing works well because, first of all, you have zero emotional investment in this collection. I think, though, it only becomes harder to weed things that you yourself have purchased. So there's something awfully liberating about going into a collection where you're like, I have zero stakes in this collection. We could get rid of all of it and we could start all over again, but we won't. But I think that you can do a very aggressive weed because you don't care. You didn't buy these books. You didn't process them and put them on the shelves only to watch them linger and collect dust. And ultimately, when you realize that your students and your staff are going to benefit, the more thorough this job is, and they deserve so much better. I think what's something that is incredibly validating about why we are so important to a space is because our training is what has prepared us to make very aggressive decisions about the future of this space and realize that just having books on the shelf just for the sake of them not being empty, that is doing a gross disservice to your patrons. And so, no, I think your library was lucky to have you, because anybody else would have been like, oh, these books look okay. You're like, oh no, that's not at all how we decide what stays and what goes.
Well, I made signs when I first arrived. After I did the weeding, my library system got our cataloging database in 2015. I was in middle school in 2015. So I put a picture of myself in 7th grade on the signs around the free books that said, the last time these books were checked out was when I looked like this. And so if any administrator or teacher came in and questioned me on it, I literally had me with janky braces on my teeth, and that's the data. That's all you need to know, is the last time these books were checked out was when I was in middle school over 10 years ago. So they gotta go. And no one really questioned me on it. They were happy to see that the tables were empty. And that's how I started September, was tables empty, books on shelves that needed to be there.
But again, the school is better because you took that aggressive posture and really insisted on it. So I've got to ask, when it comes to this overhaul of this collection that you did, can you give us an idea, how did you recruit your adult volunteers and how did you recruit your student volunteers?
So when I entered the 24-25 school year, I still had a lot to do. I didn't even touch my nonfiction, and I didn't even touch my manga or my graphic novels. So I first started with my nonfiction, and I did pull lists. I did your weeding hit list where you give it some sort of range. So mine was never been circulated or hasn't been checked out since I think I did 2017 or 2018, just to give me some wiggle room. But you have to be careful when you do the never been circulated because, you have new books that are on there. So I just took a Sharpie and cross those out so you don't read them. And then I would have students that would just come up and look at me hunting for books. And they're like, what are you doing? And so it was a very organic process. And they were like, can I do that? And I was like, okay, sure. So I did what I called scavenger hunts. And so I just give a kid a hit list, like a weeding list, and a clipboard, and they'd sit there. And I have a couple nice rolly chairs. So they'd literally sit in the rolly chair, prop their feet up on the bookshelf, and pull the books, put it on a cart, and then check it off the list. And then I'd have 4 kids doing that at once. And just because they knew they didn't want to do their, they didn't want to do their homework ninth period at the end of the day. They just wanted to chill. So that's what they did. And it kind of evolved from there. I had kids help me once they were pulled. I would withdraw them from the collection. And then I gave middle schooler Sharpies, which you need to be careful with doing that. My kids are very trustworthy, so they're okay. My books are stamped on the top, on the front inside, and on the back side on the inside. So they cross it off with Sharpies, and then they cross off the barcode, and then it goes on the shelf for me to dispose of later. And so that's part of what they did at first. And then involving adults, I just kind of sent out a staff email saying, hey, I'm going to get rid of these nonfiction books. Can you come and make sure what I'm taking off the shelf is irrelevant? Because I don't want to take something off that fits with a curriculum that I think is meaningful to them. I actually got this idea from Sarah Kelly Johns, who is one of my mentors. She told me, invite them in for coffee and then have them weed for you. She actually told me to have them look at the current shelf and then pull stuff off, but I did it the opposite. I already pulled stuff off. And then instead of them telling me, oh, this needs to go back on the shelf, they're like, can I have this for my classroom? I'm like, okay, sure. Take the load off. Sounds good to me. And I actually weeded DVDs in June, and I did the same thing, and all my DVDs were gone because the librarian before me bought PG-13 and rated R movies, and I needed those out. I couldn't have those. So my staff took those off my hands and I didn't have to do anything. And I didn't notice that those were on the shelves until I was moving stuff around.
My personal experience with bringing in teachers, we know, especially my experience at the elementary level, I think 5th grade, going into 6th grade, they all did that passport around the world and everybody took a country and then you had a little passport and you could stamp it because you went and talked to the different kids around and you could get your passport stamped and it was great. But friends, you ever walk into a classroom and you realize what happened to books that you really had hoped were never going to be used because they were so old? So I went into this classroom. It was a 5th grade classroom. I saw 2 World Book Encyclopedia sets from the 80s and every country book that had ever been used in our collection, but then had been replaced so that the ones in the classroom were now circa 1990s. And this was in, this would have been only about 6 years ago. 6 years ago, I walked through these libraries or these classrooms. I was like, whoa, what's going on? Because we don't need to have our students reading books from Poland from 1984. It's like, whoa, what are we doing here? This isn't right. This isn't fair. Let's just resort to like, hey, World Book Online. Let's get, Pebble Go, let's get something that the kids can use online. And so that's my only thing was when we get to things that are like so date specific. I mean, it's one thing if your art books and your how to draw books, things that don't date, you've got a lot of things that you absolutely could move into the classroom. But boy, when it came to those country books and the social studies teachers doing those country studies, oof, that was harsh. That was really like, oh, please, can we just not?
And the teachers that I had come in to help me do that are like rock stars in their content area. So they were pulling stuff that was dated, but it was still somewhat relevant to their content areas. So I had like an English teacher pull my poetry books. That's not going out of style anytime soon. The kids just aren't interested in poetry in the nonfiction section. They're interested in novels and verse, but not, books like the Random House collection of children's poetry. They're not into that stuff. But like my science teachers pulled stuff that was relevant to their content. Social studies pulled stuff that was still relevant to their content. And they know better than I do. So that's why I invited them to come and help me. And only a few teachers did. And you know what? If no one else wanted to take me up on that offer, that means it's not important, and we move on.
Well, and I think what's also important to realize is that you had the courage to be candid and upfront with your staff and explain that we do ourselves a disservice when we have books on the shelves which are outdated. And then these are the books that our students are using. And I will be very honest. I mean, when I have had to remove books from the collection, it is very difficult to worry perhaps that somebody might say, hey, where are you going with those books? What do you mean you're throwing those books away? Why we can use those books. Those books look brand new. And so when teachers and non-librarians learn the rationale and respect the reason why this process needs to happen, it really does speak a lot about the professional relationship that you have with your colleagues.
And I think what's important about at least my perspective is I was entering a space that everything was everywhere, and I'm refining it and making it better for my users and my learning community. So my staff, my faculty, my admin trust me. Like that's the reason I was hired, was to clean up, and they trust me. And that just, I do provide the rationale every time I send emails out, but if no one bats, I haven't really had any flack. Everyone kind of trusts me, and our custodial staff is more than happy to give me the big wheelie cart to go bring them to the dumpster. So
did you get an average age of your collection before you started your weeding?
I didn't actually. I actually didn't know how to do it, but now I'm at 2005, which is not fantastic, but my fiction's a lot younger. My nonfiction is still really old, but I'm not really developing it that much, so I'm okay with that right now.
I would definitely go and just get an average age of your fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, just to see. Because you're right, when you factor in nonfiction, for me, the average age was 2002 when I walked in the door. But if I had done just the fiction, I think the average age of just the fiction would have been considerably higher.
I think my average age is probably 2015 on my fiction, which is fantastic.
Nice.
So
no, that is respectable.
Yeah.
And friends, you're going to want to make sure you check out the show notes, which Alexa has so generously shared. I love the photos that you shared of your library. It is so obvious of the work that you've done to transform the space in the short time that you've been there. You've literally transformed the space in a very short period of time. Your staff has to be very, very appreciative.
My former principal would rave to parents that I am the strongest person in the building just by the amount of books that I've gotten rid of. But my significant other did a lot of the heavy lifting because he's a lot stronger than me, but I'll take the compliment.
There you go.
I do have to move really heavy tables, though. My tables are really old and clunky. I'm hoping at some point to maybe get some new ones. But I am strong in the sense that I can carry a lot of books. Well, but I did have help.
But also in so much that you took on a very unpopular way to, I mean, what a way to sort of introduce yourself to the staff. You're like, hi.
Hi, I'm dusty and sweaty. How are you?
And I'm going to be getting rid of a lot of these books. And you know what? I may look young, but do not question my professionalism when we do this, because you have to realize that, those books we're doing, and just having books on the shelf for having books on the shelf is not why they brought in a professionally trained school librarian.
Right.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the second phase of using your school community to support your collection development, and that was specifically with your graphic novel collection. Can you spell out what you wanted to do in this phase?
My graphic novels, when I first entered the library, were still under the Dewey designation 741.5. And I went away with that when I worked at the public library because graphic novels are fiction. They're not nonfiction. They shouldn't be classified under our Dewey classification. At least that's how I feel. Other people might have their own opinions on that. But 741.5 is designated for comic strips. And that's not what these are. These are not Peanuts comic strips, even though I love Snoopy so much. These are graphic novels that have depth and have, more than just 4 panels to giggle at in the Sunday funnies, right? So I decided I wanted to move away from that when I walked into the library. However, I didn't have obviously time over the summer to do that all by myself. I still had 1 semester left in grad school, so it was about January of 2025. And in New York State, you have to student teach. But my program, you had to fulfill your student teaching hours using a special project to enhance your library if you already have a job, which I did. So I actually reached out to my advisor before that class even started because it was just about the student teach. It was just called like Student Teaching in the Media Center or something like that. So I was on a separate track because I already had a job, and I just said, hey, what's the project going to look like? So I reached out to the professor early and I said, these are some of my ideas, but I'd like to get started before, the class starts or start racking up ideas. So I was thinking about diversity audit, but I'm like, this is going to take me forever. And I only had 2 to 3 weeks to complete it. It's like, I can't do a diversity audit. That would take me too long. I've already done one for grad school. I did it for a graphic novel collection at one of our local elementary schools in Lake Placid. And that took me 3 weeks to do. And that wasn't even my own library. It was someone else's library. So I just did it for a grade, right? So I'm like, I can't do that. My other one was updating the average age of my nonfiction. But at that point, I really didn't have much money. So I didn't really want to use my budget for that. So I then thought, oh, I'll just relabel my graphic novels and my manga because I want to revamp that. So, because again, manga and graphic novels and comic books are fiction, they're not nonfiction, so they don't belong in Dewey. So I had all my students who are very interested in helping me with drawing books. So I thought to myself, hey, maybe involving my students with this process would make it go faster. But let's just think, because I had kids that I love to process books. It's actually my favorite part of my job. And I gatekeep that so heavily. I don't let anyone else do it, just me. I love stamping. I love putting the barcodes on. I love putting the spine labels on. I don't get my books processed from the vendors. I get them just regular books so I can do it myself. And this is where like the librarian letting go kind of, I'd get the kids that are like, can I stamp? And I'm like, yes, if I watch you do it. Or can I put the barcodes on? And I go, yes, if I watch you do it. I don't let them put the spine labels on. But this is where I was like, okay, maybe I'll let them put the spine labels on this time and it'll be okay. So I sent my proposal to my professor and was like, hey, I think I'm going to let kids put spine labels on books. And she was like, that is the most amazing idea I have ever heard. It'll be so fun. So we did it. Took 2 to 3 weeks to relabel over 3,000 graphic novels, comics, and manga books. And they all have different spine labels. So my graphic novels and my comics have GN instead of the Dewey number, and then my manga have MAN instead of the Dewey, and then they have the author's last name. And how it would work is I had 4 students a class period, so we run on a 9-period, 40-minute bell schedule, but I'm out of the library for 2 of them, so we only ran about 7 40-minute periods for 2 to 3 weeks to do this project. And so 4 kids would sign up in the morning, and what's cool about it is I don't have a library program where kids come and, a lot of schools have them fill out an application to be a library helper. I decided not to do that because I thought it gave kids more control over their library space if they just volunteered their own time. Like they come on their own free will and they do what they help you in the ways that they can give at that time. It's kind of like take a penny, leave a penny. They can help when they want to, and then I can help them when they need it kind of thing. So 4 students would help. We ended up giving out roles to each other. So I would have a kid be the project manager, where they would oversee what was going on. I'd have a kid do the spine labels. I'd have a kid do the label protectors. And then I'd have a kid who would pull the books off the shelves and then reshelve them. Actually, one of my students who very proudly donned the project manager role, I told him about the podcast, and he goes, next time, Miss Dumas, you should really have people apply so they can list their prior experience, because that's really important in this. And I'm like, okay, it's actually not that big of a deal. It's fine. But the kids did a great job. And I think what helped about this project specifically is we're covering spine labels that already existed. So my control issues with spine labels went away because they knew what they were covering. And when it's just a blank book, they don't do it correctly. They just put it either too far up, too far down, and then I have to fix it. But they already had a guide to do. It got to a point where I was the slow poke. I thought they were going to be the slow ones, and I would want to advance the project faster, because on my end, I have to print the labels and I have to update my catalog the minute that the spines are updated. So we would get a book in front of me. I'd print the spine label. I would scan it in my system, send it to the kid. I'd edit the mark record. And then that would be, 3,000 books later. That's the process. But the kids were way faster than I was. And I'm like, they'd start yelling at me. They're like, Miss Dumas, you need to hurry up. And I'm like, I can only do so much.
Wow. But, I think what is fun is that, first of all, you made it look fun. And that is contagious. Like, what you do, they see, and by empowering them with responsibility, honestly, they will become these faithful stewards of this space. They will absolutely be invested in its well-care, when it's making sure that students treat these books with respect. And it is like, when you give this kind of responsibility to students, they're now amongst their peers and will be absolute role models when it comes to being in that space and treating it accordingly. So I see this as a win that will continue. And I would not surprise me the next time you have another project, you try to figure out how you can incorporate student assistance to help you do that. And it really does, make things go a lot faster for sure. But it does that first, the hardest hurdle for me emotionally is getting over the fact that I'm going to be relinquishing some of this responsibility to people who perhaps do not come with the same kinds of care and responsibility that I have. The I alone can fix it approach is not going to succeed if you plan to do this for a long time. You obviously made modifications because you were working with your middle school students as opposed to like adults. And it's interesting, though, but I think it's easy to see where sometimes that enthusiasm of your young people, your parents are in there because they just want to help the school. They just want to do something, and they were here and they're volunteering. But, and especially in middle school, a lot of times those parents who had been classroom volunteers in elementary school are sort of ushered out of the classroom in middle school. So they're still looking for those ways to get involved. But I know that when you work with students, you have to be far more specific in how you explain. And boy, you're arming the kids with Sharpies when you're weeding. Can you imagine putting those Sharpies in the hands of a bunch of middle schoolers and saying, I need you to block this out?
It actually wasn't as bad as I anticipated. It went totally fine because I said, the minute I see marker on skin, you are done and you're out. You're out. You're not doing it again.
One of my libraries that I did a very severe weeding because what was happening was, and this was during the pandemic, so it was actually great because we didn't have students in the building. So we were actually consolidating 9 elementary schools into 7. So the 2 schools that had closed, we were sort of bringing those books in and doing a heavy weed of the things that we had because we had newer books that we could replace. But my predecessor, and my God, I had so much hate in my heart for this person because they chose to stamp the book, I'm going to say 5 times, inside cover, inside back cover, top, outside, and bottom. there were 5 school stamps on each book. And these books had to be blacked out with a magic marker. And every single, I was like, really? You stamped this book 5 times? I was just, it was so hard. I was like,
the one life hack that my mentor librarian, the high school librarian in my district, has given me, she just came up with it this school year, is print withdrawn labels on the big mailing labels that you might use for your barcodes, and just write with, like, make a template, put withdrawn, and then print them out, put them on your spines, and put them over your barcodes, and then you could just black out the top or put the stickers on the inside, and that's all you have to do.
Love it. You've already given us one great hack with the withdrawn labels, but what advice would you offer to listeners who might decide to also adopt a community collection development approach with their next big undertaking?
So again, with the Sharpies, if you don't feel comfortable with your students doing that, you can just use like a washable marker. It'll cover enough of what you need to have covered. And again, use those mailing labels. You don't even have to put anything on it. I don't do that. I don't take the time to waste ink. I just slap a blank one on and it does the job. It's fine. If you have a library helper program, this would be a great task for them to do. I just don't have the time to go through, the whole process of selecting kids. I like that they just volunteer their own time. They come when they want, and that's good enough for me. I've actually, because of all this work that students have in the library, they want more. So sometimes when my library aide is absent, I have them shelve for me and they know what to do and they do it correctly. Sometimes the same kids will come in and they're like, the shelves are looking ugly. And I'm like, okay, you know what to do. So they put them back together and make them nice and orderly. So it gives them so much autonomy over their space. It's not even funny. It's so beautiful to see. Especially like when we did the relabeling project, kids would point out to their friends, oh, look, I did that. And they're so proud of their work. And it makes the library such a student-centered space where they can see the work and effort they put into their own library. It's just so beautiful. And when I submitted my final paper for grad school, my professor was like, this was the best thing ever. I can't believe it worked. And I'm just like patting myself on the back like, yeah, I did something good.
Well, and friends, I'm listening to Alexa gush about her students. Let's remember, we're talking about middle schoolers. And, there are people for whom middle schoolers strike fear in our hearts. And the reality is that you've managed to give them responsibility that many people would shudder because we're talking about young people. And again, middle schoolers doing these jobs and being proud of the jobs that they're doing for their library and taking ownership over aspects of your program. When, I'm sorry, but for some people, they absolutely, the idea of teaching and working with middle schoolers does give them pause. So I find this very encouraging.
Yeah, when I first accepted the job, I was like, uh-oh, maybe that wasn't a good idea, because I went to a pre-K through 12 school growing up. So I thought I wanted to be a pre-K 12 librarian and see everybody. But actually, after being in middle school for 2 years, I love reading middle grade. Actually, one of my favorite podcast episodes was the Young Teen Lit episode. And that's like a bus I'm hopping right on. We need Young Teen Lit so bad. I try to purchase it as much as I can. But middle schoolers truly make my life. They're so funny. They're at such an awkward, they're not at an awkward stage, but they're on an interesting phase in life where everyone's been there. Everyone knows what it feels like. And to be the place of solace that they go to is so heartwarming, especially when they tell you straight up how they feel. I think being a Gen Z teacher and also being the same generation as them, I understand them a little more, and that's maybe why they're more, gearing toward attaching to me. But sometimes they just want candy, and they know that I'll give them candy if they do something for me. So this barter free labor thing I have going on. They just want the lollipop that's sitting behind my desk. And I have a 500 Dum Dum bag I bought at Sam's Club that still has lollipops in it. So I'm ready to get rid of that whenever they're ready to give me their time.
Friends, candy is my love language as well. We've had students come in tears. We've had students come in who are absolutely having the worst day. And you'd be surprised how quickly some sugar, unexpected sugar, really can, and throw in a therapy dog. I bring my therapy dog with me to library. And wow, there's a lot of healing that can happen with a dose of sugar and, some little scratches with the corgi in the library. So Alexa Dumas, you are such a breath of fresh air. I have so much faith in the next generation of school librarians coming down the pike. My goodness, we're in for a treat. And thank you so much for sharing your energy, your positivity, your youthful perspective on our profession, because it is desperately needed. And I am so grateful that you have now contributed to this resource, which other people call upon for inspiration and for ideas and encouragement. Thank you for the resources you're going to generously share with us. And I cannot wait to see what happens, because I imagine this is not the last we've heard of Alexa Dumas.
Yeah, this project is continuing this school year. I'm genrefying my graphic novels. Kelsey Bogan's episode on genrefication really inspired me. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. Mostly by a student need. I just get too many kids that are like, I want the spooky graphic novels. I want the romance graphic novels. And I'm like, I can't think of those books off the top of my head right now.
I'm also thinking of the nonfiction graphic novels and the graphic memoirs. That's huge.
I genrefied those when I got the library. So those have already been done. I actually have them separate. So I have graphic biographies and then graphic nonfiction. My kids love the graphic memoirs, but I'm finding as they're pulling books off the shelf, they're actually a lot older than I thought they were. They're actually more adult graphic memoirs. So I actually have to do not a weed, but I have to do more of a reconsideration of those just to fit my readers, because they like the cuter ones. They don't want to know, of an adult's trials and tribulations. They just want to know about kids who want to join a soccer team and have some life adversity that they can relate to. So I already did that part. So that's done. I don't have to worry about that. It's just the fiction part. And I've actually separated my comic books. So now my graphic novels, my manga, my comic books all live separately. But I'm then going to do sub-genrefication with my graphic novels, which I'm involving my kids in yet again. I'm only going to have 2 to 3 kids help because 4 actually was too many. I thought 4 was the perfect number, but that project manager kid actually isn't really doing that much, just kind of bossing people around. So when I do the genrefication, it's more of me scanning the book into Follett, seeing what the tags are, and then I'll have a kid put the genre sticker on, have a kid put the label protector on, and then the third kid can shelf, and then that'll be it.
Well, and you know what? At some point, you're going to realize those kids age out, and they will graduate, and you're going to have to recruit a whole new group of helpers for your library.
Luckily, my kids that I had last year were in 6th grade, so now they're 7th graders. So I have them for 2 more years. So I'm okay for right now.
Alexa Dumas, thank you so much. Please let listeners know where we can follow you on social media.
Sure. So I'm a bookstagrammer as my little side project. I read so many books that I just have a book Instagram, and you can follow me at alexad_reads. I post every single book that I read, and sometimes I do other fun content. Like if I meet authors, I post about it. If I have some fun book chat, some bookstagrammers do fun reading challenge things, so I participate sometimes. I'm going to do videos soon. I just filmed myself inventorying my comics, so I'm going to stitch together a little fun clip. And then I'm also on Bluesky, and you can find me at alexadoom.bsky.social.
Thank you very much. And you know what? I hope in The next time you feel inspired to share, don't hesitate, reach out, and I wish you the best of luck this school year.
Thank you so much.
Friends, if you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. If you are curious to know how often your state or country has been featured on the podcast, then simply click on the link which can be found in our show notes. Search title, author, state, and country, and do a Command F search. I hope this is the year you consider being a guest on the show. Please visit the FAQs in every episode, and you'll realize just how easy it is. We all have something to share. Make Season 8 your time to shine. This week marks the American Association of School Librarians National Conference, which is held every other year. This year, school librarians from across the United States have arrived in St. Louis, Missouri to share, inspire, learn, and lead. I am meeting up with friends and colleagues and hopefully securing more than a few promises to record upcoming episodes. I have also been recording attendees and will share their voices with our listening community. The topic of our next episode will be episode AASL 25 and my conversation with the attendees of our national conference in St. Louis. I hope you will tune in.